Lots of nice rules previews for the Sisters of Battle today. We now know both the stat line and the points cost of Paragon Warsuit, Celestian Sacresants, and the Dogmata. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're talking about the new Sisters rules previews. Warhammer community has given us a fair amount of detail over the past few days. Today we've seen stat lines and weapon profiles for Paragon Warsuits, Sacresants and the Dogmata, and yesterday we saw some stratagems and the new Blessings of the Faithful ability to upgrade your characters. Today we're just going to talk through all the revealed rules and see what there is to get a bit more of a grasp as to how these units might function in the new codex. Let's start off with these new Paragon Warsuits then. From Chapter Approved 2021, we now know that they're an Elite's choice and they cost 240 points for 3 models. You can't take any more or less than 3, and if you do upgrade them to multi-melters, then that's the only upgrade that charges points, and that costs 10 points more. I'm going to be trying to get a review out for the new Sisters points changes. That is already recorded, and hopefully that should come out tomorrow. In any case, now Games Workshop has given us some details for the Paragons. We now know both their points cost and the vast majority of their war gear and abilities. Their stat line is fairly hefty: 8-inch movement, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 5, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8 and a 2+ armor save. 8-inch movement is quite nice to actually catch some things in melee. I'd say their durability looks fair enough for the points, maybe not absolutely outstanding, but it is augmented by the Paragon Warsuit giving you a -1 damage rule, so they function a bit like Space Marine Dreadnoughts or Death Guard in that way. It'll mean that they're a bit more resilient to damage 2 weapons, for example, though I still think that they're going to melt very easily indeed to any sort of dedicated anti-tank fire. If they get hit by Dark Lances or Admech Cognis autocannons, they're going to go down absolutely straight away. We can't be certain that they don't have an invul save of some sort, though none has been mentioned yet. I guess I wouldn't be too surprised to see something like a 5+ invul on these girls, maybe in a similar way to Terminator Armor or the Dread Knight. Either way, they're going to be quite hard to shift with any small arms fire or anti-elite fire with damage of 2. Really, you're going to want to fire things like anti-tank weapons at them, which should be really quite efficient against the Paragons. In terms of war gear, they get either a Heavy Bolter, Ministorum Heavy Flamer or a Multi-Melter. No idea what a Ministorum Heavy Flamer will be doing yet, but it might be a little bit more powerful than the standard version. Then they have a choice of a couple of Carapace weapons, either some sort of grenade launcher or a Twin Storm Bolter. Looks like quite a similar choice to things like maybe the Redemptor Dreadnoughts for a small flurry of close-range firepower. To be honest, against light infantry, I think they might be a bit more of a strong threat at range as opposed to in melee. 2 Storm Bolters up close and rapid firing will give them a big 8 strength 4 shots nearby, never mind supplementing that with something like a Heavy Flamer. In combat, we have the stat line for their 2 melee options, the Paragon Warblade and the Paragon War Mace. The Warblade is strength +1, so strength 6, AP -3 and damage 2, and gives them +1 attack. The War Mace is strength +4, so strength 9, AP -2 and a flat damage of 3. You also have to subtract 1 from the hit roll made by the attacks on the War Mace, so it's definitely going to be quite a long way behind whenever you're fighting against lighter infantry. Both of them cost the exact same points cost. I think they seem fairly balanced. I might be a bit more tempted by the War Mace just because of that big 3 damage, allowing them to engage heavy hitters really well. Of course, we don't have all the details yet. We don't know whether they're going to be core or not. I wouldn't be too surprised if they were, to be honest. They do more look like a squad that you could command, as opposed to a big vehicle or something, but I guess Space Marine Centurions didn't get core, so I guess we'll wait and see. In any case, I think they could be quite good fun with Bloody Rose melee buffs. Having one enormously hard-hitting unit in the centre of the battle line could be a good thing. Next up, we come to the Celestian Sacresants, who we now know are an Elite's choice, cost 14 points per model, and you get 5 to 10 models in the squad. They're armed either with a Hallowed Mace or an Anointed Halberd, and typically a bolt pistol, though they can upgrade to the special pistols, things like Plasma Pistols, Inferno Pistols, or Hand Flamers, each of which will cost them 5 points. They can also take something called a Spear of the Faithful, which costs 5 points extra, perhaps a Sergeant upgrade for some extra melee power. Their stat line is exactly what I would have guessed, to be honest. Movement 6 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 3, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 8 and a 2+ armor save. I'm going to guess that the 2+ armor save is to represent their shield, adding +1 to their save in the same way that storm shields do. I'd be amazed if a model with a big shield like this didn't get some sort of invul. They would be very hardy indeed if they did get a 4+ invul save, but a 5+1 wouldn't be terrible either. For the squad's based melee weapons, you either have the choice between those hallowed maces or the anointed halberds. The maces are strength +2, so strength 5, AP -1 and damage 2, and the halbards are strength +3, AP -3, but only damage 1. I guess it kind of depends on exactly how heavily armoured foes you're fighting. Sometimes the AP -1 just isn't going to cut it. Like things against Terminators with Storm Shields, they're just likely to bounce off. In general though, I do think that having access to damage 2 is generally going to be worth it. I suspect that the maces might be more of the take-all-comers option, though those halbards do look very cool indeed. I'm sure that the Sacresants will be cool, and to have a really tough melee unit for the sisters will likely be a big asset. Hopefully could wind up being a similarly annoying squad to remove like Space Marine Blade Guard veterans, very hardly slogging up the board and being pretty lethal when they get to melee. Finally, for the more in-depth unit previews, we have the Dogmata. She has been confirmed to be an Elite's Choice character, and she costs 65 points from the new chapter approved. I'll be honest, I was quite surprised at this. I thought that she was going to be an HQ. The Sisters Elite slot does seem very crowded at the moment. She's going to be competing against things like Imagifiers, Hospitalars, and the Dialogus, all of which are going to be cheap support characters as well. She basically has the same stat line as those options, exactly the same as the other Elite support characters. Movement of 6, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3+, strength and toughness of 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, and a 3+ armor save. I'm not sure whether or not she'll count as having a Rosarius or not. As normal with these ones, she's mainly going to be there for the buffs. We do know that she's going to be able to get access to War Hymns, a Chaplain Litany-like ability where you roll to cast them in the command phase, and then they give you various buffs from there. There was an anti-psyker one that seems a bit niche, and then one that gives a decent buff to Sisters units with bolt guns. She might be quite handy to have at the centre of a battle line as well, as she can also buff a unit with Unflinching Determination. One core unit within 6 inches gains Obsec, or counts as an extra model if they already have it. I have a feeling that that could combo pretty well with those Celestian Sacresants. They're not going to be troops, so aren't going to have Obsec, but they are looking like very durable and annoying to remove models. Exactly the sort of unit that you might want to get Obsec on. Finally, she's armed with a nice general purpose melee weapon. The Mace of the Righteous will be striking at strength 5, AP -2, and a flat damage of 2. She's not going to be soloing enemy characters on her own anytime soon, but she might be able to lend a hand against a weaker unit perhaps. Overall, looks interesting. It'll kind of depend as to whether or not those War Hymns are strong enough. Next up we have the Blessings of the Faithful ability. This is the Sisters character upgrade that gets paid for in points. It's not 100% confirmed, but from the article yesterday they did mention that this will be available to Canonesses and Palatines, which would kind of imply that the other Elite slot characters will be locked out of it. It's only going to be those who can deploy these. It seems that we have 6 different buffs of various different power. They each have their own different points cost in that table on the top right, and we've only seen the preview for the one at the very top, the Word of the Emperor, the one that costs 40 points. Each of these buffs has 2 parts to it, one ability that's just always on, a flat upgrade to the character in some way, and one that's called a Miraculous ability, which is a temporary buff that you need to activate with a Miracle Dice. Again, we don't know the exact mechanic yet, but in some way the Miracle Dice will extend the range of the ability depending on what sort of number that you pick on the Miracle Dice. I would hazard a guess that maybe you get 1 inch's worth of aura buff per the number on the Miracle Dice. In any case, obviously we don't know about the rest, but this Word of the Emperor one looks very interesting. It does cost an enormous 40 points, so it's almost as much as having another character altogether, but its always on buff is a very good one. It makes one enemy unit always fight last when they're within 3 inches of the character. These abilities are really handy to have as a buffing unit. They make sure that your units get to fight and give some protection against character interruption, and we do seem to be seeing more and more of this ability as the new 9th edition codexes roll out. The Miracle ability though looks incredibly powerful as well. If you expend a Miracle Dice, then when an enemy unit is within Miracle range of this ability, when any Order, Core or Character units make a melee attack against that unit, then they will be able to ignore its invul saves. Now this one is a spectacularly powerful debuff to go on certain units, as a lot of options in 40k really survive and are made a lot stronger by having access to good invul saves like this. To be honest, a Canoness with Word of the Emperor is exactly what you want to have, just within a few inches of an enemy unit that you're about to charge. They won't be able to interrupt due to fighting last, you'll be able to just ignore any invul saves that they have, and hopefully carve straight through them with a fighty unit, like maybe those Paragon Warsuits if they're core, or maybe the Sacresant or some Zephyrin perhaps. 2 incredibly powerful abilities there. Maybe the biggest risk is that it has to go on a fairly fragile character. Putting Canonesses or Palatines on the front line with a big price tag of an extra 40 points on their head will make them likely to be the units that are going to be targeted. In any case, it looks really interesting. I'll certainly be interested in what those other 5 do. Finally, we get 3 previewed stratagems so far. One appears pretty much unchanged from the old codex, Faith and Fury for 1 CP, that allows you to use 1 miracle dice both for a hit roll and a wound roll. If you have one shot with say a melter weapon or something, that pretty much guarantees that it lands provided you use a high enough number. The other 2 are new. Inviolate Shield Wall is a 1 command point defensive buff, and it helps Sacresants or Crusaders out in melee. Basically it makes them -1 to wound in melee, so things like Space Marines will be wounding them on a 4+ rather than on a 3. Quite a handy one this. If Sacresants really are as durable as they look, then it could be great on them. Bit of a shame that it can't be used against shooting attacks, that would make them spectacularly tougher to kill. Finally, we have a slightly more expensive 2 command point one called Defenders of the Faith. You have to select a Battle Sister squad, so that's actually one of the troops units, not another core unit, and they have to be within range of an objective marker. Basically they get a couple of very Space Marine-like buffs. Their bolters basically ignore the rapid fire rules and always get 2 shots, regardless of whether or not they're within rapid fire range or whether they've moved or not. Each bolter should be getting 2 shots up to 24-inch range. The other bit is activating a transhuman physiology light stratagem. It means that wound rolls of 1 to 3 will always fail, regardless of the enemy model's strength. I'd say that this one's interesting, though I'm not sure it's quite as overpowered as a lot of people on the internet seem to be thinking it is. You do have to activate this in your own movement phase. You can't just react to the transhuman physiology buff in reaction to enemy shooting, which is part of what makes transhuman physiology quite so good. And also it costs 2 command points, not 1. I'd say you really want to be using both parts of the buff to absolutely maximal effect to want to use this. It does seem like a fairly decent option for a Battle Sister squad on a center objective. One way they might be able to dish out a fair amount of hurt with those bolt guns, and then also are likely to be targeted in return by enemy units. It is quite a powerful defensive buff on a toughness 3 army, but it does come with what I'd say is a reasonably fair price tag for including it. At 2 command points, I don't think I'll be using this every turn, and your opponent might be able to play around you just by targeting all the other units that don't have this buff up. Still though, I'd say that both of the new stratagems seem very usable. So that brings us to the end of the New Sisters rules for now. As always, I look forward to hearing what you think in the comments down below, and I'll certainly be making a review of the New Sisters Codex once it comes out. As I said, I should have a video coming out on all the new points costs for the new codex. That should be releasing tomorrow, so feel free to subscribe or check back later if you'd like to see that. Finally, if you have been enjoying a lot of the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, which is what keeps these videos coming quite so regularly. Making quite so much content like this does take an enormous amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, any support is really appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain new videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.